Hello everyone and welcome to this video on an Inspector Calls. In today's video we're going to look at the character of Inspector Goole. Now all my videos are really interactive, so you need some paper, you need a pen in front of you, and it's really important that you take the activity seriously, so don't just skip over them to get to the answers. Pause the video when I tell you to, do the activity and then look at the answers. That's the way you're going to get the most benefit from watching this. First things first then, I want to know what you know about Inspector Goole. So pause the video, jot down everything that you already know about the inspector, and then start the video again when you're ready. Okay, here are my ideas then. We're going to start with what he does in the play. So first of all, the first time we hear about Goole is when he rings the doorbell. Now, at that point in the play, Mr. Burling is giving a speech about how Gerald and Sheila are getting married at such a good time. The speech really promotes capitalist and individualist values. And in the middle of that speech, Goole rings the doorbell and stops Mr. Burling in his tracks. Now, this symbolises socialism cutting right through capitalism and really showing that socialism is able to dominate. At this point in the play, when Goole comes into the room, the lighting changes from being described as pink and intimate to being harsher and brighter. So it's almost as if when Goole enters, he sheds a light on the Burling's corruption, sheds a light on the truth. He is there to reveal kind of the evils of capitalism to the audience. When he comes in, Goole announces Eva's death. He does that quite harshly. We'll look at that in a minute. And then he interrogates the family, trying to draw out of them what their relationship was with Eva. Then he gives quite a profound speech. We'll look at that in some depth in a few minutes. And finally, he leaves very mysteriously. Okay, some key quotations then. So the first one is the sharp ring of a doorbell. Then when he comes in, he creates at once an impression of massiveness, solidity, and purposefulness. Then when he's talking about Eva's death, he describes how the disinfectant burned her inside out. Later on in the play, when he's interrogating Mr. Burling, Burling says that if he doesn't come down sharply on these people, on the workers in his factory, they'll be asking for the earth. And Goole points out, well, it's better to ask for the earth than to take it. He tells Mr. Burling that public men have responsibilities as well as privileges, and then he gives his final speech. But as I say, we'll look at that in some detail in a couple of minutes. Right, what does Goole symbolise? Well, he's Priestley's mouthpiece, and he's used to articulate Priestley's ideas about the morality and justice of socialism. To be somebody's mouthpiece means you speak for them. So Priestley puts his ideas about society into Inspector Goole's mouth, and then Goole speaks on behalf of Priestley. Key vocab then. So socialist is a word we will use a lot in relation to Goole. Collectivist, omniscient, didactic, moralistic, determined, Priestley's mouthpiece. And I think I've got one more. Oh, no, I don't. Anyway, we'll look at the vocabulary in a little bit as well. Let's start by digging into some of these quotations. Now, if you've watched my other videos, you'll notice that this is a little bit different. That's absolutely fine. And we're just going to focus on the meaning of each of these quotations first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain each of the quotations. I want you to listen and then pause the video and jot down what you can remember from my explanation. Okay, so the first one is sharp ring of a doorbell. Well, we need to know when this happens in the play. It's towards the beginning of the play. Mr. Burling is giving his capitalist, individualist speech. During that speech, Goole rings the doorbell and we hear this sharp ring which cuts right through what Mr. Burling is saying, and that shows us that socialism can dominate over capitalism. Okay, your turn. Stop the video, jot down what you remember from what I just said, and then start the video again. Right, time to check your answer. Sharp ring of the doorbell. Mr. Burling is giving his capitalist, individualistic speech at the start of the play. Inspector Goole rings the doorbell really sharply, which shows his determination and the harshness of his arrival, and that cuts right through Mr. Burling's speech, showing us that socialism can dominate capitalism. Right, second one. So listen to the explanation again, then pause the video and see what you can remember from what I've said. So here, This is a stage direction which describes Inspector Goole when he first comes into the room. And it says that there's an impression of massiveness. Now, Goole is supposed to be quite physically imposing. He's supposed to physically dominate the scene. This is to show the strength of socialism, how powerful it can be, how it can dominate over capitalism. And it's repeated in a stage direction later in the play where Goole massively takes charge. The word solidity, or the adjective solidity, again shows how kind of sturdy and robust socialism is. Purposefulness tells us that Inspector Goole is determined. He's there for a reason, and the reason is to make the family face the consequences of their capitalist lifestyle. Okay, pause the video, jot down what you can remember from what I've just said, start the video again to get the answers. Right, so quickly then, massiveness shows us how solid, how stable, how dominating socialism is. It's repeated in several stage directions later in the play, where Goole takes charge massively. Solidity again shows us how robust socialism is, and purposefulness is an adjective which tells us how Goole is entering the room for one reason, which is to make the Burling family face the consequences of their capitalist choices. Next quotation then, burned her inside out. Now this quotation is really unpleasant. Goole is talking about Eva Smith's suicide and how she's drunk disinfectant as the method of committing suicide. And Sheila is really horrified in the play when she hears quite graphic description of what has happened to Eva. However, there is no accident that Goole describes Eva's death in this way. He really wants to emphasize how brutal the death was, how much Eva suffered. Okay, pause the video, see if you can remember what I said, start the video again. Right, so what I said was that Goole really wants the audience and the family to know how brutal Eva's final actions were, how brutal her death was, and how much she suffered as a result of the Burling selfishness. Next quotation then. So Mr. Burling has been talking about the strikes, and he says that his workers you must come down sharply on some of these people, or otherwise they'll be asking for the earth. So his workers have been asking for everything. Actually, they've been asking for a few shillings, haven't they? But Burling says if you let them have those few shillings, they'll be asking for everything. They'll be asking for the earth. And Goole comes back at Mr. Burling and says it's better to ask for the earth than to take it. The implication here is that Mr. Burling is the one who's just been taking the earth. He's been exploiting his workers, he's been using resources, he's been trying to make as much money as he can for himself, and he's not stopped and asked for that, he's just taken it. Okay, pause the video, write down what you can remember, start the video again. Right, so what I said was the context of this is that Mr. Burling has said that his workers, if you don't come down sharply on some of these people, they'll soon be asking for the earth. Here, Goole is pointing out that actually Mr. Burling is the one who's taking the earth, and at least the workers are asking for permission. Final quotation then on the screen. So this is Inspector Goole. He reminds Mr. Burling that as a public man, as a person who sits on the bench, so he's involved as a magistrate in the court of law, and as someone who owns a business, he has responsibilities. He has certain things that he needs to do to make society function. Okay, pause the video, jot down what you can remember from what I've just said, start the video again. Right, so what I said was that Mr. Burling was a magistrate, he's a business owner, and as both of those things, he has responsibilities. He needs to look after his community. Okay, so I raced through those quotations quite quickly because what I really want to focus on in this video is this speech that Inspector Goole gives before he leaves the family at the end of the play. So I want you to just pause the video again and read through that speech, and then once you've read it, start the video. So it's quite a profound speech. There's lots going on in it as well, and we're going to unpick that little bit at a time. The first thing I want us to look at is the phrase millions and millions and millions. So just think to yourself, what is it that you notice about that phrase, about the type of words that Priestley has chosen? And what you'll probably be thinking is, well, he's repeating the word millions. We've got a list of 3 millions here. Surely one would have been enough, Priestley. However, He does this to emphasize just how many people there are in the working classes who are suffering as a result of capitalist greed. He's emphasizing just how many people need the help of the upper classes. Then we've got the phrase their suffering and chance of happiness. So here Goole is speaking about the working classes. He's talking about how much pain they've been in, and actually how they could be happy, how life could be better for them, but it's not because of that capitalist greed and that exploitation. The next point that Goole makes then is that the lives of the working classes are intertwined with the lives of the middle classes and the upper classes. To be intertwined means that things are all mixed up together, like bees in a hive, which is Mr. Berlin's quotation from earlier on in the play. And the word I, that's a pronoun. So a pronoun is a word that stands in place of a noun. And here I suggests that everyone is in this together. Everybody is in the same boat. And Priestley really lays this on thick all the way through this speech, because we've got we don't live alone, we are members of one body, we are responsible for each other. The repetition of these inclusive pronouns really drives home the point that people do actually live like bees in a hive. People should look after each other and take responsibility for other people within their community. Looking towards the end of the speech then, this phrase, we are members of one body. So we notice that inclusive pronoun first, but then what we also have here is a reference to the Bible. Now, a reference to another text in English literature is called an allusion. Not an illusion, which would start with an I, but an allusion, which starts with an A. And an allusion, as I say, what was it? Yep, so it's a reference to another text. And here the allusion is to the New Testament in the Bible, where it says that all Christians are members of the body of Christ. All Christians are members of the church, and they have a responsibility to help each other. Now, it's no mistake that Priestley is referring to Christianity here. It is at this time in kind of British history, probably one of the more dominant religions that we have in the country. At the time that the play was performed, I mean, in the 1940s. And so it's a reference that lots of people in the audience would have picked up on, and they would know that the teachings of Christ are regarded as being good moral teachings. By that, I mean it's a good guide to living your life in the right way, to being able to help other people in the right way. So this quotation, we are members of one body, just to go over that again, it's an allusion, A, not I, allusion to the Bible. And it's a reference to the teachings of Christ, which the audience would have recognised as good moral teachings of how to live one's life. The final bit of this speech then, if men will not learn that lesson, they'll be taught it in fire and blood and anguish. So this refers to the older generation of the Berling family, the people who are refusing to learn their lesson, who are refusing to change their ways and let go of capitalism and become more socialist. And if they don't learn that lesson, then actually the choice is going to be taken away. It's going to be taught to them whether they like it or not. And that's going to happen in fire and blood and anguish. Now, again, this could be a biblical allusion, a reference to the Bible. It could be a reference to the apocalypse, which in the Bible it's towards the end of the New Testament, and it's where Jesus returns, and those people who have not followed his teachings are going to be punished. They're going to be sent to hell. It could also be a reference to the Second World War, and the audience in the 1940s would have been well aware of the destruction that war can cause, because they've just come through the Blitz in the Second World War in London. So it could be a reference to that as well. Either way, it sounds like a pretty horrendous punishment for refusing to change their lives. And then Inspector Goole says goodnight, and then he leaves and heads off into the unknown. Who knows what he does after that. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, just to process some of the things that I've said there, is pause the video and jot down, just in bullet points, some thoughts about this particular speech. Think about millions and millions and millions. Think about intertwined. Think about members of one body, that pronoun we, and then the fire and the blood and anguish. So bullet point your ideas on that, and then come back to the video when you're ready. Let's look at the vocabulary then, just before we finish the video. So there's 7 words on the screen. Pause the video, jot down some definitions of the words, Come back to the video to check your answers when you're ready. Here's our definitions then. So socialist, in a short way of defining this, money and responsibilities are shared equally. Unlike in capitalism, where they're all concentrated in the pockets of the businessmen. Collectivist, so the community is more important than the individual. We are bees in a hive, we look after each other. Omniscient means all-knowing, so we know the inspector knows everything about the family before he gets there. Priestley's mouthpiece, so Priestley speaks through Goole, he uses Goole to put his ideas across. Didactic means teaching and educational, so we could say that Goole's final speech is didactic, he's teaching the family the right way to live. Moralistic means teaching morals and integrity, teaching others how to make good decisions. So you could say again that the final speech from Inspector Goole is very moralistic. He's teaching the family the right way to live. And finally, determined means focused. Your very last task then, don't worry, you're almost done, is to stop the video and use these words to write a summary of Inspector Goole. If you're not sure how to start that summary, just say, in an Inspector Calls, Priestley presents Goole as, and then use the words to write your paragraph. Remember to use the word because to extend your answers. So don't just say Goole is a socialist, collectivist, omniscient mouthpiece. Don't just list them. You need to say, right, Goole is a socialist because, he is a collectivist because, he is omniscient because. So use that really important word because to explain your answer. Okay, thanks very much everyone. Check out the other videos on this playlist and I will see you next time.